What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Hoopers Lounge. And today it is our first episode of the off season leading into the 2027 NBA season, or I guess the 2026 season. And today we will be doing our final mock draft for the NBA draft that takes place on Tuesday night. So, right around the corner here, just a little over 24 hours from this time of recording. And me and Alex are going to give you guys a full first round mock draft today, picks 1 through 30. Our mock draft we did a couple months ago during the season. This is a lot different. A lot of players returned to college. A lot of players fell, I think, in the mock drafts, and some guys' stock obviously rose with their play, maybe in the NCAA tournament or throughout the rest of the college basketball season. So I'll kick it over to Alex to get us started here, and let's get into this mock draft.
Yeah, there are definitely some differences in our picks. Like you said, some guys' stocks rose and fell throughout the year, and there were also a lot of guys who returned to school that were even projected lottery picks. Thomas Hall and Braylon Mullins come to mind. I personally had Tunde Yesufu going really high. He also ended up returning to school. So the NIL has definitely, we've already seen the effects, seeing a lot of potential one and done freshmen or even upperclassmen returning to school because they can get a fat payday at the college level. So that is something that definitely changed our mock drafts. We definitely have a few guys missing from our lottery mock draft. The one we did before was only 1 through 14. Those guys will not be in this one. And we come to you with our full 30 pick first round mock draft. Now we have the teams, we have the lottery results, we have combine results, we have NBA franchise intel, and that is what we were basing our picks off of. The previous one we did was kind of our personal rankings. Now we're using all the information we have to try and predict how this draft will go down tomorrow. So we'll start with the top. Pick one. The Washington Wizards are on the clock. Max, who do you have them taking?
This one's, I don't want to say obvious, but I think the best player in this draft, top to bottom, is AJ Debance. So I'm going to put him at number one. I think the Wizards will select this wing over some of the other guys in his maybe tier of selections like a Darren Peterson or a Cam Boozer. I just think Debance has the best floor of anyone in this draft, as well as the highest ceiling, which that's a really hard combination to pass up on, in my opinion. This guy can score from all three levels already. He's lengthy, he's athletic, he can play defense. He's a great teammate from what I watched him play at BYU. I thought he was amazing with his team, not trying to do too much, just doing what he was asked to, and changing his game based on the game script from time to time. Obviously, his team wasn't very good, and they had a disappointing end in March Madness early, but I still think AJ Debance is the pick here. I think he fits great with Trae Young and Anthony Davis, too, and what they're building in Washington. I think that's a perfect wing to complement, an all-star guard and an all-star big. I think that's a perfect wing. So give me AJ Debance at one.
I completely agree with you. Both of us had Debance going one in our first mock draft at a time where the majority of experts were saying Darren Peterson was likely the number one overall pick. So pats on the back there. We were early on the AJ Debance hype trade, and I am still going with Debance at my number one as well. Like you said, I think he has the highest floor and the highest ceiling. I genuinely think Debance is on the level of Cooper Flag and Zion Williamson in terms of a prospect. And I think he's being a little underrated just because of how stacked this draft class is, and the fact the next two guys could also have also been deemed as generationally good talents. But Debance, I think, is an immediate floor raiser for the Wizards. I think the Wizards could very well challenge for a top six seed in the East next year with this big three of Debance, Trae Young, and AD, like you said. Jazz, if you're not taking, if AJ Debance is off the board, that's who the Jazz really want. Debance is the hometown kid from Utah. He went to BYU. He's likely going number one, which will leave the Jazz at number two with Darren Peterson. That's not a small. That's a pretty good consolation prize, if anything. Peterson is one of the best scoring guards in the last 25 years of college basketball. He was absolutely electric as a freshman. He has very few weaknesses on the court. His weaknesses mostly come off the court. His playing time was inconsistent. He was unavailable due to injuries. He had weird cramping that kept him out of a lot of games throughout Kansas's regular season. His off the court was a bigger storyline than his on the court production, which is never what you want to see from a college freshman. His talent is undeniable. It's just a matter of whether or not he loved the game of basketball enough to be elite at the NBA level. But I think the Jazz at this point is definitely a pick worth taking. You already have your front court with Lauri Markkanen and Jaren Jackson Jr. You have a great scoring guard in Keontae George, but you need that number one. I don't think any three of those guys would be a number one on a championship team, and I think Darren Peterson has the potential to do so. Which leaves our third generational talent, Cam Boozer, going to the Grizzlies. Boozer, I think Boozer's he has a high floor. The question mark about Boozer is his ceiling because of his limited athleticism. Boozer is incredibly productive. He's a high IQ player. He can score, he can rebound, and he can pass at an elite level. He can stretch the floor. And the most important part, he has won at every level he has been at. He's been an elite player. He was arguably the greatest high school player ever, looking at his resume, and he won the National Player of the Year in his one season at Duke. So this is a guy that has produced at every single level, and there's no reason to think he won't continue doing so at the NBA.
Yeah, I've got the same top three as you. I've got Peterson with the Jazz and Boozer with the Grizzlies for many of the reasons you said. If you're not picking Debanta, you're probably going to take Darren Peterson just because of how high his ceiling is compared to Boozer for sure. The one thing that does concern me for Utah, though, is I'm really high on Keontae George, and I don't want to stunt his development with bringing in another ball-dominant guard like Darren Peterson. So I think to me, if you're Utah, that might be just a consideration that maybe you try and trade to the number one pick. I think that Utah getting Debanta to me is a perfect fit for them. I don't think Boozer or Peterson fit as well as Debanta, whereas I think a lot of these other teams could take any one of them. And then for Memphis, I think Cam Boozer being the face of your franchise, I think is really good. A good restart after the Ja Morant saga and the Jaren Jackson Jr. trade. I think just resetting fully and building around, Cam Boozer, who, like you said, is just an all-around winner. Like, he doesn't have the most skill. He doesn't have the most athleticism, but it's hard to bet against a guy like Boozer being successful in the NBA because of how much success he's had at every level. He reminds me a lot of Jalen Brunson and how he won at every level before coming to the NBA. And it did take him a couple years to get to that number one role, but Cam Boozer has the experience and he has the pedigree of being a winner to succeed at this level. So I think that's a home run pick at 3 for the Grizzlies.
And I love the fit. The Grizzlies have a really good track record of drafting and developing high-level talent. A lot of the players in their franchise history were their own their franchise icons were their own draft picks. So I think Boozer would be in a great place landing in Memphis, and Memphis would also allow him the patience to develop and get acclimated to the speed. Because, like you said, it took Brunson a few years, despite being a 23-year-old rookie who has won at every level of basketball he's played at. It took him a few years to get adjusted to the NBA. It is important that Boozer is in a place where he will have that patience and that time to develop and get used to the game at the speed of the NBA. And Memphis allows that opportunity. If I were Memphis, though, I would strongly, strongly consider taking a look at the number 4 overall pick, at least who I am going number 4 overall, to the Chicago Bulls and Caleb Wilson. Because I think Caleb Wilson has the second highest ceiling in this draft, above Darren Peterson. I think Caleb Wilson, if he can develop to his full potential, I think this is Kevin Garnett reincarnated. The dude he was a two-way force at UNC before suffering his broken hand and then refracturing it later. That ended up keeping him out of March Madness and the rest of the year. But the first 20 or so games of the year, he was a dominant two-way force at college basketball. He was integral to UNC's upset over Duke, and he was the team's emotional leader as a freshman. I mean, he took charge of a blue blood team, and the first 20 games or so, he had them looking like they could compete against anybody. Caleb Wilson, as a Chicago Bull, I think is a great fit for both teams. Bulls, just like the Grizzlies, are also seeming like they're entering a full-scale rebuild. They're willing to allow prospects a few years to develop. Caleb Wilson, he's raw. He's going to need that time to develop into his true ceiling. But if he hits that ceiling, the Bulls could get an absolute home run at the number 4 overall pick. I think Wilson's ceiling is higher than Boozer's, and that's why I think the Grizzlies should take a look at him. But this is how I have the board falling out. Boozer going to 3 and Caleb Wilson going 4 to the Chicago Bulls.
Yep, no arguments for me here. I also have Caleb Wilson at the 4, and I think you could argue significantly that he would have been maybe in the top 3 if he didn't get hurt. I think there's definitely an argument there. I liked what I saw to Caleb Wilson at North Carolina. Obviously, how couldn't you? I remember in our last mock draft, I compared him very similarly to Pascal Siakam, and I think that type of player is a player that every team would need, and I think that's where Caleb Wilson is headed, kind of towards a 20, 22 and 8 type of guy that's a borderline all-star. That to me is like right in his realm. He can be that as early as his rookie season, I think. If he plays for a team like Chicago that just feeds him the ball. I really think that with a guy like Josh Giddey, why can't Caleb Wilson be averaging 20 next season, right? Like, who else is going to be taking shots for the Bulls? Like, I think Caleb Wilson is a sneaky pick. Well, just look at the first 3 picks, for example. Like the Wizards with Devonta, he's going to compete with Trey and AD. Darren Peterson's going to be competing with Keontae George, Markkanen, and Jaren Jackson. Cam Boozer, presumably right now, would be competing with Ja Morant. Who the hell is Caleb Wilson going to be competing on the Bulls roster for shots, right? So, to me, I think Caleb Wilson, you said his ceiling is sneaky potential. I think he's sneaky potential for Rookie of the Year next year. Like, I really think that he is, if he's drafted in the right situation, his numbers could look stupid for rookies. And I agree. I think the Bulls are a good fit for him. They're gonna be bad the next couple of years. Like, they're not gonna be good. So they're only gonna get better as Caleb Wilson develops. And I do have him going at 4. So top 4 for you and me are identical. That's a good start.
I hear you out on the Rookie of the Year. He will have more opportunities. It will presumably be the number 1 option in Chicago, or at least the number 2, and that's not a guarantee for at least the top 2 rookies. And Cam Boozer, like you said, he still has Ja Morant. He still has Cedric Howard, who they drafted last year. Memphis still has some good parts. Bulls are in a full-scale rebuild. Caleb Wilson should be one of the integral parts of their offense. But Wilson is also a lot more raw on the offensive end than Cooper Flagg was last year. And Flagg barely hit 20 points per game as a rookie. So I don't know if Caleb Wilson is developed enough offensively to impact the game that much offensively in his rookie year. And I mean, you're asking who the Bulls have to take shots. I think Matas Buzelis still has an incredibly high ceiling on the offensive end. I think he could develop into a borderline all-star. Giddey will have the ball in his hands a lot as the primary playmaker for the Chicago Bulls. I think Wilson's offensive role, I don't think he'll be the consensus number 1 option. He will have the ball in his hands a lot, probably more than the other 3 rookies right off the rip. But 20 points per game, I think might be a bit of a stretch for a guy who's still pretty raw and developing on the offensive end. He will be an immediate two-way force, though. He will make an immediate positive impact defensively, which I don't think you can say that about the other 3 prospects that we've said so far. So,
yeah, I can agree with that. I think the opportunity to become the number 1 for Wilson is higher than any of the other 3. And I think you could maybe argue Boozer with the uncertainty around Ja, but Ja's an all-star caliber guard at his peak. So I still think rookie year Boozer, I don't know if he can emerge as the number 1 guy there in Memphis, his rookie season at least.
Yeah, that's fair. We'll move on to the next part of the mock draft. And for the picks 5 through 9, I have a run of 5 guards. These are 5 guards that have been, or 4 of these guards were in our lottery mock draft last time. And one of these guards had a late season rise to work his way into these top 10 conversations. So just to list them off real quick, the Clippers, who had the Indiana Pacers pick after the Pacers got absolutely robbed in the lottery. The Clippers, I have taken Keaton Wagler. The Nets, I have taken Darius Acuff. The Kings, Houston Flemings. The Hawks, who got the pick from the New Orleans Pelicans in last year's draft, I have taken Braden Burries, who is the riser who we didn't have in our last mock draft. And the Mavericks, I have taken Mikal Brown. Keaton Wagler, I feel like offers what the Clippers need the most. I don't know if he's necessarily the best of these 5. I think Darius Acuff is the most talented. But Darius Acuff, I feel like, is very similar to Darius Garland, who the Clippers just traded for. I feel like they need a playmaker more than a scorer. And Keaton Wagler, I think, is the best playmaker among these five. He also offers great positional size. And Wagler was an incredibly late riser. He was a 3-star recruit out of high school, committed to Illinois, was not expected to be a starter, and emerged as Illinois' best player by the end of the year. So he's shot his way up these mock drafts in recent years. He still has a lot of untapped potential, considering how much he improved in his 1 year in college. And I think he'll have a lot of opportunities to be the primary playmaker on the Los Angeles Clippers. Should rack up assist numbers, being able to play alongside Kawhi Leonard. The Nets, they took 4 guards in the last draft, but I am still not sure about any of them as a core pillar of the future, as much as I am about Darius Acuff at the very least. Acuff is an absolute bucket. He will. You were talking about Caleb Wilson being able to average 20 a game. I think Darius Acuff could legitimately average 20 a game as a rookie on the Brooklyn Nets. Who it's going to be him and Michael Porter Jr. essentially being the entire offense this next year. And the Nets don't have their first round pick next year, so they have no incentive to tank. So they should be developing Acuff and prioritizing his playing time as much as they can this season. 7, Kingston Flemings to the Kings. This one was tough. I seriously debated Mikal Brown Jr. here, but I think Flemings would offer a lot more both playmaking and defensively than Mikal Brown Jr., and therefore I think he does offer a lot higher of a floor. The Kings entering a full-on rebuild, they need pieces. They need somebody that has a floor. They can't take a risk on a boom or bust prospect like Mikal Brown Jr. and risk stunting their rebuild for another year. Kingston Flemings, I feel like, is a sure thing as an NBA as a starter. I think he's a very Drew Holiday-like player. He's not going to wow you with his numbers, but he's going to contribute. He's going to do the important things a team needs to win. He can get buckets. He can play make. He can defend. And I really like having Russell Westbrook as a potential mentor if the Kings decide to re-sign him in free agency. So might be something to look at there. Hawks, who had the Pelicans pick, Braden Burries was the riser, who we didn't have in our mock draft. As soon as Big 12 play started, this dude took off. He became one of Arizona's best players, if not their best player, in what was a loaded Big 12 conference. He shot at an extremely high level, and that is what intrigued me over Mikal Brown in the fit for the Hawks. The Hawks, who already have Jalen Johnson and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, are looking for a guy who will be more impactful off the ball. And Braylon Burries specialized at that in Arizona. He was great off the ball as just a quick trigger shooter. And yeah, that's why I'm going number 8 to the Hawks. Wrapping up the guard run with Mikal Brown at number 9 to the Mavericks. Brown did not have the season many expected at Louisville. He battled through injuries. He struggled with turnovers. I think he averaged more turnovers per game than assists per game, which is definitely not what you want to see from a guard. But he also offers a lot of height for the point guard position at 6'6", and he, like Darius Acuff, is a bucket. He's been a bucket his whole career. And if he can round out the other parts of this game, Mikal Brown, just like the other top 8 picks, has all-star level potential. And getting that at the number 9 pick is great, great value for the Dallas Mavericks.
Yeah, wow. So these next 5 picks, we have the same 5 players, just a little different order. I'm kind of surprised you didn't sprinkle in a big there. But I agree with you. I think these 5 guards are going to be in that second tier of this NBA draft, right in this 5 through 9 range. And I'll go through my order here. So at 5 for the Clippers, I actually have Kingston Flemings going number 5. And I looked at this as the Clippers with Garland and Leonard are trying to compete next year. They don't need a developmental prospect like Wagler, or Acuff. I think they need that plug-and-play starter next to Garland that will contribute on both ends of the court. And I think Kingston Flemings, to me, I look at a guy like Ty Lue. I think Ty Lue would love to coach this guy. I don't know. That was a gut feeling for me looking at the guards. And I thought to myself, Ty Lue and Kingston Flemings just kind of go together in my mind. And so I have Kingston Flemings going 5 purely off of team fit. I don't think he's the best of these guards by any stretch. But I think that because of the Clippers' current roster status and their ability to compete at least, into a playoff spot next year, I don't think they have time to try and develop one of these more unproven prospects, if that makes sense. Number 6, I have Acuff, just like you did. I really liked your points about Acuff averaging 20. He's, in my opinion, the best I think this might be a hot take, but I do think he is better than Darren Peterson, and I think he's the best guard in this draft. I think Peterson as a prospect is the better prospect, but as a basketball player, in terms of who I would want to run my franchise, Darius Acuff to me is the second coming of Allen Iverson. And I didn't watch, but I know AI was carrying a bunch of bums to the NBA Finals. And I think Darius Acuff, to me, offensively, there's nothing he cannot do. Defensively, obviously, there's liabilities, but we just saw Jalen Brunson win a championship. So defensive liabilities, to me, can be worked around. Acuff is insane, and I think Brooklyn and the city as a whole would be lucky to have Darius Acuff. So I have him at 6. I'm really high on Acuff. 7, I have Keaton Wagler to the Kings. I think you and I switch Wagler and Flemings. I think the Kings are they need a dude that can develop into a number 1, and I think that's why Wagler fits this mold really well for them. I just don't see a world where the Kings are competing for something this year with the core of DeRozan and Levine and Sabonis. Throw Wagler in there and maybe they get a little more exciting to watch, but they're just old and they're slow. And I think Wagler, his youth and his ability to create both on ball and off ball, I think would help them tremendously. Then at number 8, I have Michael Brown Jr. For very similar reasons that you did, honestly, that you had Braden Burries, at 8. Is that off-ball presence. I think Michael Brown's just the better shooter than Braden Burries, and I think at the NBA level, that definitely matters. I think Michael Brown can also play on-ball. With Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Jalen Johnson, I don't know how much he'll be doing that, but neither one of them are really a true point guard. I more view Alexander-Walker as a scorer than a point guard, and I wonder if Michael Brown can develop as not only an off-ball shooter, but maybe a primary playmaker for this team to get Jalen Johnson and Alexander Walker more shots as opposed to putting them in a playmaking role. And then 9, I have Braden Burries to the Mavs. I would be extremely excited about a backcourt of Kyrie Irving and Braden Burries to me. I think that backcourt is super versatile. They can score, they can shoot, they can play make. Both of them have elite handles, and I think he would fit really well alongside not only Kyrie, but Cooper Flagg as well as, like you said, that off-ball shooter. So those are my 5 through 9 picks. We swapped the order, but same players. Yeah, that was tough, though. I think those 5 guards are so interchangeable, and I couldn't tell you. Actually, I would bet that Acuff ends up being the best out of that tier, but who's the second best, I couldn't tell you. I really could not tell you who the second best guard out of that is going to be. I would lean Wagler or Michael Brown probably, but if it was Kingston Flemings, I wouldn't be surprised, right? All these guys are good, and I think this part of my mock draft was really based on team fit for me, just because I couldn't really differentiate them skill-wise.
Yeah, I agree. I do think Acuff is going to be the best out of the 5, but Allen Iverson's comparisons, wow, that was unexpected. You are high on Acuff. I like it. I do got to ask you this out of curiosity. Let's forget all the mock drafts, forget all the expert opinions. If you were the GM of the Utah Jazz, would you take Acuff over Darren Peterson?
Yeah, I would. But wow. I don't know if I would take him over Caleb Wilson or Cam Boozer, but I think I would take him over Darren Peterson. I think I would. I think Darren Peterson, to me, a couple things stand out to me about Peterson. One, you already talked about his care. Like, how much do you really care? That scares me a little bit. And 2, the stories about him only working out for Washington shows to me that he has a little bit of an ego, and maybe he believes that Washington's going to take him over Dembانsa, which could be true. They very well could do that. But those are things to me that if I'm starting a franchise, I don't know. I just have more confidence in Acuff that he's more coachable. He's going to be able to develop faster because he's able to take in knowledge from not only his coaches, but his veteran teammates. Like, how much do we really think Darren Peterson will listen to Keontae George?
Mm-hmm.
Probably not. I mean,
Not that
Keontae
much.
George is an unproven guard, right, who had a breakout season, but in Darren Peterson's mind, I don't know how much he would listen to a guy like Keontae George or a young coach like they do have in Utah. I think Darius Acuff, coming from what I just watched him do with a great coach in John Calipari, I just have more confidence that Acuff will develop. And offensively, Peterson's the better. I don't even know if Peterson's the better scorer, to be honest. It's neck and neck for me. Like, I'm not saying one's better than the other, but if you tell me, like, with a straight face that Darren Peterson can score the ball 100% better than Acuff, I just wouldn't believe you. Because I watched Darius Acuff drop multiple 30 pieces in the NCAA tournament. So that, to me, carries a lot of weight. He played in I don't know if he played in a harder conference. The SEC was pretty bad this year. But he played for a great coach. So did Peterson. But Peterson didn't show up for half the practices, half the games, and that just scares me. You can't do that at the NBA level. So as an individual prospect, I would agree that Peterson's better. But yeah, if I was the GM, there's nothing that scares me about Darius Acuff, if that makes sense. Like, there's nothing that concerns me about Acuff. There are a couple of things that you can nitpick about Peterson that concern you that could grow into bigger issues, and I think that's part of the reason why I would definitely consider Acuff as the number one guard in this draft.
In Peterson's defense, AJ Debonsa is actually not working out for a single team because he's confident enough to say they saw what I can do on the court. They know who I am. So there is a level of confidence needed to, be a player that's available to be taken this high. But I do agree with you. I have Peterson. I do think Peterson's a better prospect, but I also think he's more high risk than Darius Acuff. I think Peterson's one of the most high risk prospects in this draft. I think if things go absolutely terrible, he could very well have a Ben Simmons type flame out where his passion for the game is just lost. And that is really concerning when you're taking a guy at the number 2 pick to be the face of your franchise. So definitely something to consider there. One more thing I want to say about your guys. Mikael Brown Jr., during his one season at Louisville, shot 34% from 3, whereas Braden Burry shot 39%. I do think Mikael Brown Jr. has a better ability to make those step-back contested three-pointers off the dribble than Burry's. But if we're talking catch and shoot or just three-point shooting as a whole, I think Burry's is not only better than Mikael Brown, but might be the second best shooter of these 5 guards behind Darius Acuff. That was his calling card at Arizona. That's what he offered. Elite shooting early in the year, and then his offensive game started developing when he got to Big 12 play, and then by the time they got to the NCAA tournament, it was he and Jalen Bradley that were leading the team as far as deep as they can. So Burry's, I think, will impact the game shooting-wise as a rookie much better than Mikael Brown Jr. would. Brown could develop into an elite shooter, an elite shot maker, definitely a better shot maker than Burry's, but I think his fit as a catch and shoot with the Atlanta Hawks is better than Mikael Brown, who might need the ball in his hands a little bit more to make the kind of impact that he could.
Yeah, I totally hear that. I don't really agree necessarily with the percentages just because Braden Burries was on a team where you had to worry about all 5 guys on the court in Arizona who were the number 1 team heading into the NCAA tournament. And so Braden Burries was able to get higher quality looks than a guy like Mikael Brown, who was the center of attention for every defense he played all year. I know teams at the beginning of the year were not game planning for Burries before they were game planning for Koa Pete and Jaden Bradley. Maybe not even for Krivas, their center. And so I do know that Mikael Brown was the centerpiece of Louisville's team, and I think that ability of being a number 1 and having a good enough season, I think will carry him a little bit higher than Burry's. Because how much of Burry's stock is recency bias too, right? He was not projected to be a lottery pick heading into his freshman year. I don't even know if he was going to go to the draft after his freshman year. So,
well, it was Wagler, to be fair.
Oh yeah, for sure. But Keaton Wagler was also the undoubted number 1 of his team. So
that's fair.
Especially in the NCAA tournament, I mean, when they needed something, it was Wagler. When Arizona needed something, it was Bradley this possession, then Burries the next, then Coapete the next. I mean, that it's awesome to be on a great team, right? But that also inflates your stats a little bit as well. So that's all I would say about that. Not to say Braden Burries is worse than Michael Brown, but that was just my logic behind putting him one spot below.
Yeah, no, I hear you on that. And I think all 9 of these guys that we've listed so far have all-star potential at the very worst. I think that's just how deep this draft class is. One more thing I want to say is sorry. The Clippers pick, you had them taking Kingston Flemings, but Darius Garland is about 6'1". Kingston Flemings is about 6'4". Do you have issues with the that potential backcourt size rather than the 6'6" Keaton Wagler?
Yeah, I would say that's an issue. I just think Fleming's skill set fits more to what the Clippers need right now. If the Clippers were rebuilding and they didn't have Kawhi, like if they were planning on trading Kawhi and restarting completely, I would not have put Kingston Flemings at 5. But I believe with their head coach and their star player in Kawhi Leonard that just had a career resurgence last year, you make the Zubac trade to get the 5th pick. I think you're making a move to compete at least to get a top 6 seed in the West next year. Like that to me is their goal next year. After making the play-in tournament, you would think they want to be better next year. So yeah, defensively, Flemings and Garland seems like not good, but maybe you move Flemings to the 6th man, right? And when Garland needs rest, Flemings is the guy that runs your offense, right? That's not a terrible idea either. So not necessarily needing to start both of them. I just think he's a good complement to Garland, whether they play together or he moves into a 6-man role. I think they're just good complements to compete next season.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'll hear you on that. Let's round out the lottery and rattle off the next 5 picks, starting with my team, the Milwaukee Bucks, who I have taken Nate Almond out of Tennessee preseason before this college basketball season started. Almond was talked about on the same level as Peterson, DeBonsa, and Cam Boozer. Almond was talked about as a guy who had an incredibly high ceiling and could potentially be a riser to the number 1 overall pick. He didn't have the greatest season at Tennessee. He kind of came on. He was a late bloomer there. He came on towards the end of the year. But Almond's ceiling is still incredibly high as a 6'10", 3-level scorer. I think if Zachary Risacher, the number 1 overall pick in 2024, was in this draft, this is where he would go. So I think if Almond was in 2024, he would very well be in conversation for number 1. And the Bucks are getting him at number 10, which great value there for the Bucks, who unfortunately I think are going to end up trading Giannis this offseason, which puts them in a full-scale rebuild. They're probably going to be among the worst teams in the league next year, which, of course, now that the lottery odds are flattened, now the Bucks suck. Phenomenal timing. But no, it was terrible timing. Hate my life as a Bucks fan. We're not looking good. But Nate Almond should be a foundational piece for the next half-decade of Milwaukee Bucks basketball with the incredibly high ceiling that he possesses and the Bucks looking like they're going to enter a full-scale rebuild. Number 11, on the flip side, the Warriors, who are looking to compete next year and not enter into a full-scale rebuild. The Warriors have one weakness at the position. It is center. The Warriors need a big man, and because of that, I have them taking Ade Mara out of Michigan. Mara offers a very unique skill set for being 7'3". He can move really, really well. And when you have, 7'4" Victor Wembanyama to worry about, getting your big man who can move really well, I think is going to be a higher priority among Western Conference teams. Getting your 7-footer who can slide his feet and keep up with Wemby off the dribble. And Ade Mara, I don't know if he can or can't. I've never seen him defend Wemby, obviously. But from what I've seen in his NBA Combine workouts, it looks like he has the movement to at least make life difficult. He offers a unique skill set offensively, too. He's a playmaking hub as well as a pick-and-roll finisher. His 3-ball, he was not at all there at Michigan. He was dabbling in it, but that is something that could definitely need improvement at the NBA level. But the Warriors need a center, and I think Mara is the most NBA-ready center there is in this draft, unless you're willing to count Cam Boozer as a center, but I think he's more of a forward. So I have Ade Mara going to the Warriors. Next up, the Thunder at the 12th pick, who got their pick from the Los Angeles Clippers. They actually just earlier today traded Aaron Wiggins for 2 second-round picks. traded Aaron Wiggins to the Atlanta Hawks, and that is important because it opens up a roster spot, which means this 12th overall pick is now somebody they can likely keep. And the Thunder already have a lot of guards. They are set there. So I've been going Yaxel Lendenborg, back Wolverines taken with the 11th and 12th picks. Lendenborg, I feel like, was the most productive upperclassman in college basketball last year. He was a three-level scorer. He even got the nickname Dominican LeBron, and you don't get the nickname LeBron unless you are productive at the college level. For the national champion Wolverines, I think he was the most important piece. He transferred from University of Alabama Birmingham, where he was a walking double-double there. His stats decreased, as he joined a more talented roster in Michigan, but he should immediately be able to contribute to scoring and rebounding as a rookie for the Oklahoma City Thunder, who are looking to return to the NBA Finals. Next up, I have another Wolverine, 3 straight Michigan Wolverines being taken here, and I have the Heat taking Morris Johnson. I love this pick. Morris Johnson is that intangibles, gritty, will do the dirty work for you, and I think that fits perfectly with Heat culture. I think the player team fit, this might be my favorite one of the draft. I think Morris Johnson will be able to hit his complete ceiling if he is. I think Eric Spoelstra will love coaching him, and I think he'll get the best out of Morris Johnson. 3 straight Wolverines in the 11 to 13 range. And the last pick of the lottery, the Charlotte Hornets at 14, I'm taking Hans Steinbeck. I was looking at a guard here, a guard I will say later on, but I think the Hornets feel pretty confident with their starting guards, with LaMelo and Concanipples / Brandon Miller, as well as an elite scoring guard off the bench with Kobe White, who they traded for midseason last year, and basically won them the play-in game. So I think the Hornets are going to look more front court depth here because Kalkbrenner and Diabate are not sure things as a starter, and I don't think Miles Bridges is your long-term 4. So because of that, I've been taking Hans Steinbach out of Washington. Steinbach is not the most athletic prospect, but he's 6'10". He averaged a double-double at Washington, and he can stretch the floor. I think his size offers a lot more defensive versatility than Miles Bridges, who's standing at 6'8". You can kind of get bullied, or even by height or weight, by bigger 4s in the NBA. And I think Steinbeck will solve that problem. He can even play the 5 if the Hornets want to go small and try and put 5 shooters out on the court. So Steinbeck, I feel like, will shore up the Hornets' maybe shaky front court, and that's their biggest need going into next season.
Yeah, I hear you there on all those picks. I've got similar but different picks. We'll start with 10. I also have the Bucks taking Nate Ament. I think he was, honestly, he had an underwhelming season at Tennessee, but I don't think that hurt him as much because of how loaded this draft class was. I still think he's going to end up being a good player in this league, a serviceable 3-and-D guy. Hopefully he develops to that. And like you said, with the Bucks on the verge of trading Giannis, Ament should have plenty of time to develop into the player that we all think he can be. So I have Ament at 10. Number 11, I have the Warriors selecting Yaxel Lendeborg. I agree with you 100% that the Warriors need a center like Ade Mara. But also as a Warriors fan, I know how confident the Warriors are in Kristaps Porzingis. And I know how confident they are in small ball lineups. And I think with the rumors of acquiring LeBron and or Kawhi Leonard in the offseason, the Warriors are looking to win. And I think Yaxel Lendeborg will help them win sooner than Ade Mara would. I hear all your points on Ade Mara about the defense and guarding some of the bigs in the Western Conference like a Wemby or a Jokic and so on. But I think Yaxel Lendeborg's versatility and what he proved to us at the NCAA tournament is that he is a winner. He will provide the winning plays when needed, and Michigan really looked to him as the leader of that group. And I think it was his performances night in and night out that won them the national championship. And I do think the Warriors front office will look to that. So I have them taking Yaxel at 11. If I were the Warriors GM, I would take Ade Mara. However, I don't think the Warriors are going to do that because of the confidence they have in Porzingis and the confidence they have in small ball lineups. I don't think they'll do that. So that leaves Ade Mara going to number 12 to the Thunder, which I think is the perfect plug-and-play replacement for Isaiah Hartenstein, who I think will not be on the Oklahoma City Thunder this time next year, assuming they draft Mara here. I think Mara obviously is the younger prospect. He's much more laterally gifted than Isaiah Hartenstein. I think he will provide the perfect, I don't want to say kryptonite to Wemby, but like we said, you have to change something up with how the Spurs dominated you this season. The Spurs had the Thunder's number, and I think the Thunder acquiring Ade Mara would be their form of a recipe against the Spurs this year. And so I think Ade Mara, to me, if the Warriors don't take him, I think it's a no-brainer for Oklahoma City to take him at 12. So I just have those two Wolverines flip-flopped. Now to 13, this is where things get interesting in my mock draft. I know you love your international players. And to me, if there's any team that's going to take a shot at an international guy, it's going to be the Miami Heat. Just because of the way they believe in their coaching staff and their culture, I think they have the confidence to pick anybody. And that's why I have them taking Karim Lopez from Mexico at the 13th pick. I just look at their roster. Pele Larson, obviously, is not from America. Yakuchonis, who they took out of Illinois last year, not from America. They have a track record of drafting international players, regardless if they played in college or not. I think they have the confidence to draft them. And so I'm taking a shot. I think Lopez is right in this realm of lower lottery to upper, just after the lottery picks. And so I think I could just see the Heat taking a shot on him before a team like Charlotte did or the Bulls, for example. So I have Karim Lopez at 13. I don't know much about him, so I can't really talk to the fit there. But I also know that everyone fits well in Miami. So I'm not too worried about a Karim Lopez draft pick. And that leaves me to 14, where I have Morez Johnson Jr. going to the Hornets for very similar reasons that you did, having him go to Miami. I think the Hornets are very confident in their backcourt, and I think front court depth is the priority of this draft, and the Hornets have another pick coming up at 18 that I'll address as well, but Mo Johnson, again, like you said, can do it all. I think he would be a good complement to a stretch five that I think they need to acquire. And like you said, the Miles Bridges Hornets tenure, I think, is on expired time. I think that relationship is it's going to have to moved on from if the Hornets want to take the next step and compete. I think Miles Bridges is going to be the odd man out, and I think Mo Johnson could be a good replacement for him, just with his physicality and his overall basketball IQ. I think he's one of the smartest guys in this draft. I think just when you watch him play, he's always in the right position. He's always making the small plays, and I think that's just a testament to his IQ, which is something I think the Hornets could use because they're a young team, they're inexperienced, and I think a smart player like Johnson would help them a lot.
Yeah. Kareem Lopez, I do have him going a bit later in the draft. I had him going 14 in our previous mock draft. I have him going later in the first round, not necessarily because of anything he did, just because of how great the players in college basketball were this year. Just I think a couple of them were just better than what Kareem Lopez did overseas in Australia. And Lopez would become the first player born in Mexico to be drafted in the first round of the NBA, which is pretty cool. That just shows you how global the game has gotten, and that's only good for the game of basketball. I got a question about your Ade Mara to the Thunder pick. I agree that he and the Thunder are a great fit. I do think that if he is available, at 12, the Thunder should take him. My question for you is, what did the Thunder do about Thomas Sorber, who they drafted 14th or 15th overall last year and missed his entire rookie season due to a torn ACL? This is his rookie season. He basically he's a redshirt rookie this year. He's eligible for rookie awards. He could make the all-rookie team. Do the Thunder look to trade him, or do you just have kind of a cluttered front court?
I think one, depth has always been the Thunder's calling card, really, in this kind of beginning of their run here. They've always leaned on their depth and their ability to plug and play a number of different lineups. And I think with the questions surrounding Chet Holmgren after this postseason, I would not trade him. I would keep him. If I were to draft a Daymara, I would obviously let go of Hartenstein, as I mentioned earlier, but I would keep Sorber in a bench role, similar to Jalen Williams. I think that Jalen Williams is a guy that he's had a great career so far with the Thunder. He's done everything they've asked him to, and he has performed well when his number's been called. I would throw Thomas Sorber into those Jalen Williams minutes. I would throw him into those Ade Mara minutes. And throughout the first half of the season, before the trade deadline, I would see who's playing the best, right? See what works and see what doesn't. And then maybe at the trade deadline, you look to move Jalen Williams or you look to move Sorber, right? Or you look to make the blockbuster move and move Chet, right? So I think having depth has always been the Thunder's calling card, and I'm not really concerned about having Thomas Sorber come off the bench or having, if you're that confident in Sorber, which I'm not, I think Ade Mara as a prospect and a player is going to be much more successful at this level. But maybe you put Mara on the bench and you start Sorber, or you go small and you start Chet at the 5 and you play, another guy. And maybe you start Caruso or whatever, I don't know. But I think the Thunder have always leaned on their depth, and I don't think they're going to shy away from it now just because they have a crowded front court.
Okay, I agree with you there. I mean, I can't truthfully say I know a lot about Thomas Sorber. He played at Georgetown in his one and done college year, and I'm not exactly watching a ton of Georgetown basketball. So I do take Ade Mara over Thomas Sorber right now. I agree with you there. But yeah, on that line of thinking, I was thinking one of the four of Chet, Jalen Williams, Sorber, or Ade Mara would have to get traded because you don't have room you don't have room to give minutes to four different centers at least all season. And I'm not saying Chet is the worst of those four, but when you consider the contracts those four guys are on, he might be the worst of those four money-wise. So I do think right now he might be the most likely one to get traded.
That's crazy disrespect.
He's making $50 million a year versus the guys who are making $5 to $10 million a year. Contract-wise.
I know, but you could argue that Chet is the second best defensive player in the league. He is not the worst player out of those four. There's no way. There's no way.
Worst skill-wise. Consider the contract that they're making. No. Would you rather pay Chet Holmgren $50 million or Ade Mara $8 million?
Chet Holmgren. Chet Holmgren. I'd rather pay Chet Holmgren $50 million.
I really don't know about that. I think Ade Mara could be just as defensively as Chet in a few years.
Maybe, yeah, but I haven't seen Ade Mara play a game in the NBA, and I've seen Chet win an NBA championship and be arguably the second best player on that team. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, Chet absolutely deserved that contract, though. Like, he played like trash, I get that, but, like, let's not forget what he did before he met Wemby. You know what I'm saying? Like, Chet is still good at basketball, so...
He's still good. He's good at basketball, but he's not $50 million a year good at basketball. And that when you have a contract like that and you're not producing, it makes you a trade candidate. It makes you expendable, and it makes you a net negative to your team. Like, if Chet Holmgren was making $30 million a year, he would be incredible. Everyone would be talking about him like a future superstar because he's getting paid what he's worth. $30 million. But if you're making $50 million, you have to be a superstar. You cannot be disappearing when the lights are the brightest like Chet did. It's just that's not something I can easily forget. And like you said, I do think he's the second best defensive player in the league right now. But I also think Ade Mara 3 years from now could be just as impactful as Chet Holmgren defensively. So I do think with the depth the Thunder have at the center position, they don't necessarily need to be paying $50 million at that position when they could be playing three youngish guys with Jalen Williams, Sorber, and Mara, and figure out which among those they give the next contract to. I don't know. Just my line of thinking. The Thunder, Sam Presti, I'm sure has a plan. I'm sure has an idea of what he wants to do with Chet and Sorber and Jalen Williams down the line, and even if they want to re-sign Hartenstein or not, right? I don't expect Hartenstein to be back, but maybe they do. Maybe they throw a curveball and decide to re-sign him, right? You never know. So definitely a logjam at the 5 for the Thunder, and we'll have to see what they do there. Any other comments you want to make about the lottery before we move on to the rest of the draft?
No, let's get it rolling.
All right. 15 through the Chicago Bulls. A lot of these picks, by the way, were traded from their original teams. So 15, the Chicago Bulls have their second first round pick, originally from the Portland Trailblazers. I have them taking Cameron Carr out of Baylor. Carr emerged as the number one option. It was Carr and Yesufu essentially carrying Baylor all year. The Bears had a disappointing year, but it definitely was not because of Cameron Carr, who shot incredibly. He's a high level producer offensively. He should be able to contribute immediately as a rookie for the Bulls. Grizzlies at 16 also had their second first round pick of this draft. I have them taking Christian Anderson out of Texas Tech. He broke out as a sophomore at the college level, especially after JT Toppin went down with his ACL injury. Christian Anderson became the focal point of Texas Tech. I think him and the Grizzlies have been a great fit. I've seen this mocked for the last couple of months, this exact fit. So, I don't with Ja Morant potentially on the trade block, I do think Anderson and Coward could form a backcourt of the future for the Grizzlies. 17, the Thunder, their second pick of the draft, who they originally got from the Sixers. The Thunder right now do not have room for this player on the roster, so this is kind of a crapshoot. But I have been taking Bennett Sturts. I think the Thunder are looking for win-now players, and Bennett Sturts is a win-now player. He was a star at Drake, transferred to Iowa for his senior year, and got the Hawkeyes all the way to the Elite Eight as a 9 seed. Sturts is not going to wow you with athleticism, but he's a great pick-and-roll guard. He's a great shooter, and the Thunder do have a logjam at guards, but I think with Sturts' experience and his production, I think he might be able to find a role or breakthrough as a rookie. 18, the Hornets, their second pick of the draft. So these last four teams are all making their second first round picks. I have the Hornets taking Kareem Lopez. Again, Lopez slid a little bit from where I had him, but that's more due to the other players having great seasons than Lopez doing anything wrong himself. Lopez was solid as an 18-year-old playing professionally overseas in Australia for the New Zealand Breakers. This isn't the highest or most touted international class, which I do think does affect Lopez's stock a little bit. I think if there were some other high-level international players, it would be easier to take Lopez. But I still think Lopez is a top 20 worthy talent, and the Hornets, I think, could use more depth at the wing positions, and Lopez would be able to get some minutes there as a rookie. Raptors, at 19, I have them taking Ibuka Okori out of Stanford. What the Raptors need is scoring at the guard level. They have Emmanuel Quickley. They need more. They didn't have enough in the playoffs, and that's what cost them. Ibuka Okori doesn't do much except score, but score the ball he can do at an elite level. I think Lou Williams is a great comparison for Ibuka Okori, and what he can become, a spark plug six-man off the bench, is best case scenario for the Toronto Raptors. 20, the San Antonio Spurs, who had the Hawks pick. I have them taking Chris Mack. I think this playoffs, the biggest weakness the Spurs had was exposed this playoffs, which was a lack of a quality backup big man behind Wemby. Luke Cornett did as good as he could. He had the block against Oklahoma City in Game 7. But at the end of the day, you need to upgrade over Luke Cornett. You're having Luke Cornett as your backup center is not ideal for a championship contender. I do think Chris Nack is a project player. He's raw, but on both sides of the ball, and will need a few years to develop. And I could see him being almost like Common Maluach in his rookie year and getting very little to even no playing time at all, just because of how raw he is. So Luke Cornett could be needed next year, but I do think that 2 or 3 years down the road, Chris Nack will prove to be a very valuable backup for the San Antonio Spurs if he ends up going there.
Yeah, we have a couple of the same picks in there, which is kind of nice. So at 15, I've got Hans Steinbach going to the Bulls. I think the combination of him and Caleb Williams would completely reinvent their front court for years to come. And I'm just really excited about that fit. Like you said, the stretch capabilities of Steinbach with the raw talent of Caleb Wilson, I think that would be a difficult 1-2 punch to guard for any big man duo in the league. So I've got Steinbach going to the Bulls at 15. At 16, I have the Memphis Grizzlies taking another Cameron, and that's Cameron Carr, to pair with Cameron Boozer. And this pick was mainly based on the thought that Ja Morant is not going to be a Grizzly for much longer. I think that Cameron Carr and Cameron Boozer will be the face of the franchise, those two Cams. I think both of them complement each other really well, obviously with the scoring capabilities of both, but also the playmaking of Boozer, I think would help Carr a lot. So I have him going to 16. 17, you and I are on the same page here. I've got the Thunder taking Bennett Sturts. And you mentioned a lot about how he could get playing time. I'm thinking to myself right now that he could be the best 3-point shooter on that team next year. The Thunder
over Isaiah Joe, over
okay,
AJ Mitchell,
maybe not Isaiah Joe, maybe not Jared McCain. But I'm talking about
AJ Mitchell in there too. Then
3-point shooting, no. Scoring, AJ Mitchell, sure, but 3-point shooting, I would say Isaiah Joe is probably the best one on their team right now. Right, with McCain right behind them. But I think Bennett Sturts, when I look at the point guards on that roster, so I guess you could count AJ Mitchell and Shea as point guards, right? Guys that bring the ball up the court. Shea really struggled with his 3-point shot in the playoffs. Lou Dort, I'll tell you he struggled with his 3-point shot. I know he's not a point guard, but he struggled. Jalen Williams does not have the best 3-point shot, right? Chet Holmgren struggled with his 3-point shot. And so I think Bennett Sturts, from a shooting perspective, will help this team a lot, and that'll definitely get him on the court. And like you said, he's a winner, and he can do a lot of things that Isaiah Joe can't do, or that Jared McCann maybe can't do with the playmaking. So I'm actually really excited about Bennett Sturts to the Thunder. I think him and Ade Mara coming into the Thunder and replacing Lou Dort and Isaiah Hartenstein, to me that is scary, because I think that's an upgrade for them at this point. Just the amount of lineups they could roll at you that are still competitive, right, is mind-boggling to me. They can play an all-defense lineup. They can play an all-offense lineup. They can play bigs. They can play smalls. It doesn't matter. They're going to throw so many different things at you next year if this lineup is what I think it can be. So I've got Bennett Sturts to the Thunder, like you said. 18 Hornets. I already had Karim Lopez off the board. I already had them taking Mo Johnson at 14. But like I said, they need more wings. They need more forward depth. And so I've got them taking Allen Graves from Santa Clara. Allen Graves was one of the more underrated players coming into the NCAA tournament. But when I watched them play against Kentucky, he was arguably the best player on the court other than Otega Owe. I was really happy with what I saw. He competed against a blue blood of college basketball at the highest level. And I think the Hornets, if you had the front court of Graves, Johnson, Diabate, and Kalkbrenner, that is a significant upgrade over what you've got going for you right now. And like we already talked about, the backcourt, is really good, right? LaMelo, Kahn, Kobe White, Brandon Miller, that's going to be your core. You need guys that do the little things, the rebounding, the extra passes, the taking charge, the block shots. And I think just loading up on depth at that position is exactly what Charlotte needs, because there were minutes last year where, like, Diabate was amazing, right? But they literally couldn't take him off the floor because they didn't have anyone else that could do what he did. By drafting Johnson and Graves, you now have 3 guys that can offensive rebound, 3 guys that can block shots, 3 guys that can be physical and impose their will on opposing team centers, right? So I think the Hornets need to focus on that tremendously throughout this draft. 19 to the Raptors, similar to why you took a Corey. I've got them taking Christian Anderson here because they need scoring. And Christian Anderson, when JT Toppin got hurt last year, did nothing but absolutely hoop. He absolutely hooped for Texas Tech once JT Toppin got hurt. His 3-point shot is incredible. Off the ball, on ball, I think he can do it all. And I think, to me, he's just a better version of Quickley. Emmanuel Quickley is that fast, quick twitch point guard, right? I think Christian Anderson is a very similar build with a much higher ceiling. And I think he would do wonders for the Raptors offensively next season. And then at 20, another agreement. I've got the Spurs taking Chris Sinak Jr. out of Houston. We talked about this a lot in the NBA Finals recap about the non-Wemby minutes. And for similar reasons, I think Sinak would learn a lot from Wemby, would learn a lot from Kornet. And again, it's about having depth. He doesn't need to play over Kornet next year, but he needs to play. And the more guys you can bring in for Wemby, in theory, the more rest he will get, which means when he's on the court, the better he will be. So I agree with you 100% that the Spurs should invest in another player that can fill those Wemby minutes and possibly develop into a power forward to play alongside Wemby. Because I do think in a couple years' time, the front court of Chris Sinak and Victor Wembanyama is a lot better than the front court of Julian Champagnie and Victor Wembanyama. So I do think the risk reward here for Sinak, like there's not a lot of risk in taking a guy that's this tall and this given, right? Like if he doesn't work for the Spurs, whatever, we still have Wemby, right? But the reward if Sinak does work out, I think is too high to pass up here. So that's what I got for this section of the draft.
Yeah, Sinak has an incredibly high ceiling, raw prospect, but he could really be a starting four of the future for the Spurs. And if you can roll a lineup of Harper, Castle, Sinak, and Wemby, all homegrown talent, good luck to the rest of the Western Conference. Really, good luck if Sinak pans out and he ends up going to the Spurs. I do like Sturge to the Thunder. We both had that pick. But even if Hartenstein leaves, the Thunder currently have a full lineup, including their lottery pick. So I'm assuming they would have to get rid of somebody if they want Sturge to be an active member of the roster. Lou Dort is a name that you mentioned, who struggled shooting in the playoffs, could be an option. But the Thunder have an absolute logjam at guard with Shea, Jared McCain, A.J. Mitchell, Isaiah Joe. We didn't even mention Nikola Topic. And there's probably another guy that I'm forgetting.
Cason Wallace?
It's just Cason Wallace. Yeah. He's also a free agent this year, so he might be leaving in search of a bigger contract. But yeah, there's an absolute logjam at the guard position for the the Thunder. So some of them, at least two, I think will have to go if they're looking to get Sturt's consistent playing time in his rookie year. Hornets, we are on the same page. We just have different players. We both think the Hornets need front court depth. You just have them taking Jonathan and Graves, whereas I have them taking Kareem Lopez and Hans Steinbach. But we're on the same page about the Hornets. They just need more help in the front court, essentially. I like what you said about Diabate. I think it's a great point. They were forced to play him, even though he's not the greatest center in the world. But the Hornets literally had no one else who could rebound or who could offer the physicality defensively. Ryan Kalkbrenner is a shot blocker, but he's kind of that slow, lumbering giant role. He's not that vertical threat. And Steinbach isn't necessarily, but Lopez is a kind of a freak athlete. And Morris Johnson and Graves also fit that role. Or Morris Johnson more so. Graves isn't a great athlete, but Johnson for sure could fit that role as an explosive forward. So we're on the same page there on the Hornets. But we'll move on to picks 21 through 25, starting with the Detroit Pistons, who got their pick from the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Pistons showed in the playoffs their biggest weakness is shooting. They don't have anybody aside from Cade Cunningham and Tobias Harris that can consistently knock down a three ball. So that's what they are going to fix in this draft, and that's why I have them taking Dalen Swain out of Texas. I don't think Swain is necessarily even a first-round talent, but I think at this point in the draft, he is the best shooter. I think he is by far and away the best shooter remaining on the board. And Dalen, especially in the NCAA tournament, I mean, he carried Texas to the Elite Eight, knocking down multiple clutch three-point shots down the line. He played in a tough conference. The SEC showed keep up as the number one option, and I think he'll be a great fit on the Pistons, an immediate contributor, able to shoot the rock. I forgot the Pistons had Duncan Robinson, so he can shoot too. Shout out Duncan Robinson, but they still need shooting, is my point. And Swain should immediately help the backcourt shooting depth for the Detroit Pistons. 22, the Sixers. This pick has gotten traded multiple times, ended up in the hands of Philadelphia, and I have Allen Graves going here. Graves, like you said, he's an analytics darling. He looked like the best player on the court aside from Owe in the March Madness round. His athleticism is a question mark, but the advanced stats all love Allen Graves, and I'm sure some team around this range is also going to fall in love with him. The Sixers have their starting front court of the future with Maxey and Edgecombe. They still have Embiid, who is, he's still a Joel Embiid. You can't rely on him to be there, but when he is there, they're set at the center position. Forward is where they need an upgrade, and Allen Graves offers an upgrade at that position. The Hawks up at 23, making their second pick of the draft. I have them taking LeBaron Phelan. They acquired this pick from the Cavaliers, and I had the Hawks in their earlier pick taking Braylon Burries, who was more of an off-ball threat. LeBaron Phelan is that on-ball threat they need. I think Burries could start at the 2, whereas Phelan comes off the bench as that spark plug sixth man and immediately be a contender for sixth man of the year by his second or third season in the NBA. starting behind Burries and Nikhil Alexander-Walker. 24, the reigning NBA champion New York Knicks. Kind of tough to find kind of tough to find any holes on their roster as the reigning champion. But Mitchell Robinson is an impending free agent this year, and because of that, I decided that backup center was the Knicks' biggest need, and so because of that, I went with Jaden Quaintance. Quaintance, like Sinak, is a project player. He's very raw, and he also is very risky as a prospect because he's struggled a lot because of injury. His freshman season at Arizona State, he tore his ACL. He transferred to Kentucky, but only played, I think it was 5 games, maybe even less than that, because of the troubles he had recovering and recuperating from his injury and getting back to 100%. So very high risk prospect here for the New York Knicks in Quaintance, but he's also a guy with an incredibly high ceiling. He was a consensus top 10 pick before his injury, and he was even talked about as a top 10 pick earlier this year. I think I had him going top 10 in our earlier mock draft. So is high risk, high reward for the Knicks, but they just won a championship. They can afford to take a chance. They still have Karl-Anthony Towns under contract. It's not like they need a center. And if they re-sign Mitchell Robinson, right, they don't really need anything. So this is a luxury pick that they can afford to take a chance on. And Jaden Quaintance, I feel like, has the highest ceiling out of the players remaining left in this draft. 25, rounding out this part of the draft, the Los Angeles Lakers. I am taking Isaiah Evans. They need a center more than anything, but with Quaintance off the board, the pick before, I don't really love the fit of Henry Vesar on the Lakers. I think they need a rim runner and a rim protector, and Vesar is more of a stretch five. So I didn't love any of the centers for the Lakers here, and that's why I went with Isaiah Evans. You can never have enough shooters surrounding Luka Doncic, and Isaiah Evans, again, is one of the best shooters remaining on the board. So that's why I had him going 25.
Yeah, we have 5 different picks here. So absolutely love this for the content here. So obviously I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. I thought when you said best shooter on the board, I thought you were going to Isaiah Evans. That's why I kind of was a disagreement when you said Swain. But that's neither here nor there. At 21 to the Pistons, you said they need shooting. I think they need ball handling and scoring, which is why I have them taking LeBaron Philon Jr. to play that 6-man role. And I know you could point to Dennis Jenkins, but he's not LeBaron Philon. Okay, LeBaron Philon is an absolute bucket, and I think providing the minutes he will get when Cade Cunningham needs a rest will immediately put him in the 6-man of the year conversation. Almost immediately put him in the conversation. I look at the winner this year, Keldon Johnson. I think LeBaron Philon could be just as good as Keldon Johnson in his rookie year, provided that he's given an opportunity to do so. And I really like the fit with Detroit. I think the culture in Detroit would allow Philon to significantly work on his defense, would work on his physicality, and offensively, I mean, he's a 3-level scorer. He can do everything with the ball in his hands, and I'm excited to potentially see a lineup with him and Cade on the same court. I think that would be really intriguing. At 22, I have the Sixers selecting Dalen Swain for many different reasons that you did. I think the wings of the Sixers, to me, are my biggest issue with them just because of their age. Paul George is really old. Kelly Oubre is getting up there in age. And Quentin Grimes is no longer, a exciting prospect out of Houston. So, to me, Dalen Swain is your plug-and-play 3 behind Edgecombe and Maxey. And I think that backcourt / 3, that first 3 in your lineup there is kind of locked in for the next half decade at least of Maxey, Edgecombe, and Swain. And I think that would excite a lot of Sixers management. At 23, this is the Hawks pick, which I originally had them taking Michael Brown. And I was struggling to figure out a big that I like on Atlanta outside of Onyeka Okongwu, which is why I went with Henry Vesar here to play that backup big man role, similar to the Mitchell Robinson role that you just described in New York. I think Vesar, to me, would be a really good complement to Okongwu. He would come in, he would protect the rim, run up and down the court, good pick and roll threat, has a post game. I think he would be a good complement to Atlanta. and kind of their well-rounded philosophy there with Quinn Snyder, where everyone kind of gets their touches. I think Vesar, he's a competitor. I saw him play really well at Chapel Hill after the Caleb Wilson injury. I don't think a lot of people knew he had that skill, but I do think there's a possibility of him alongside Jalen Johnson or him backing up Okongwu. I like that in my mind. So I've got him going at 23. 24 to the Knicks. This is where I have Isaiah Evans. Like you said, the defending champs don't have a lot of weaknesses. So I thought to myself, let's just get more shooting. Because in reality, their roster is really good. There aren't a lot of holes, and I honestly didn't even know that Mitchell Robinson was a free agent, so that might have changed my pick here, but I'm still going to go Evans. I think he's a good player off the bench that will fill in for, Jordan Clarkson got a lot of minutes. I don't foresee him being a Knick much longer. I think Evans could easily take the Jordan Clarkson minutes, eat into some of the maybe Jose Alvarado minutes. I expect Tyler Kolek to get more minutes this year as well. So any bench role for Isaiah Evans, I think, and being able to learn from Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby, I think Evans is a good fit here. And like you said, it's just hard to find a guy they need. So it's more of a guy they want. And I could easily see once, they have to move off Bridges or Anunoby that Isaiah Evans comes into that starting wing role for the Knicks. Then at 25, this was a really interesting one for me because I also am believing that LeBron will not be a Laker next year. I don't know where he'll be. I believe he will be a Warrior, but I don't think he'll be a Laker. I think he'll go somewhere else before he re-signs with the Lakers. And I also think it's in the Lakers' best interest to not re-sign LeBron. I think this is the perfect opportunity to move fully into the Luka Doncic era. And the player left on the board that I felt works best with Luka is a player with the skill and IQ of Koa Pete. I think Koa Pete and Luka would be an insane duo. That to me would be very exciting to watch. The pick and roll ability of those two, the pick and pop ability of those two, as well as just the overall well-roundedness of Koa Pete's game. I mean, I remember heading into the college basketball season that I'm pretty sure Koa Pete was projected to be a lottery pick. I don't know that for certain, but he has fallen way down the boards. I think if the Lakers can snag Pete, that is a steal here at 25 to go alongside of Luka and Austin Reeves. Now, if you have LeBron on your roster still, that's where things get dicey because I don't know how that fit would work, but I'm assuming LeBron has been moved off of, and you have a starting lineup of Luka, Reeves, Rui, Kobe Pete, and DeAndre Ayton. That to me is a competitive starting five. That is a starting five that is going to win you games in the NBA. That is a starting lineup that will win you games you're supposed to win. And I'm really excited to watch Luka and Koa Pete play together. So that's what I've got, 21 through 25.
Yeah, 5 different picks that we both had, but at this point in the draft, we're both nitpicking. It's kind of hard to separate one from the other and kind of differentiate between team needs. Yeah, I could hear you out on Isaiah Evans being the best shooter. Hell, I could even hear you out if you wanted to say Malik Thomas. But just like from Cam Boozer's presence, and Malik Thomas benefited from Acuff. So that was just where my line of thinking was. But you could really make an argument for all three, or even, some players down the line if you really, really want to. So we're nitpicking there. I do gotta say, Koa Pete, though, I disagree with you. I really don't like that fit alongside Luka Doncic. Luka thrives alongside shooters and rim rollers, and I don't think Koa Pete is necessarily either. He was advertised as a shooter, but looking at his stats, he only shot half a three-pointer. He averaged half a three-pointer per game and shot 35% of them. Three-point shooting was not a specialty, and I think that is a big reason what led to a slide down the board. Because, yeah, you're absolutely right. He was a projected lottery pick. And I remember Arizona's first game of the year, Koa Pete was the team's leading scorer. He dropped like 30, and he shot up the draft boards. And then the rest of the year, it was guys like Burries and Bradley and Krevox who took over offensively for Arizona, and Koa Pete kind of became the an elite level. So I'm not sure how I feel about the fit of Koa Pete to the Lakers. I think Isaiah Evans and his shooting ability will help Luka out and just give Luka more space to operate on the offensive end.
Yeah, I agree with you on the shooting capabilities, but I also know that Kobe is an elite finisher, and I think he can be developed. Once you learn how to play with Luka, I think Koa Pete could absolutely be an elite rim runner. Pocket pass, one dribble, and one. Like it, rim running does not have to be alley oops, for example, right? Like we saw in Dallas with Derek Lively and
Good
Daniel
point. That's
Gafford.
fair.
So I think Koa Pete, once he learns how to play with a Luka Doncic and an Austin Reeves, he can be an elite rim running power forward center wherever you want to play him because he was an elite finisher around the rim in college. Um, Again, not necessarily going to be throwing down one-handed alley-oops and whatnot. So I agree with you on the shooting piece that his shooting does need to improve, and that's not going to be a skill in which he helps the Lakers immediately. But on the rim running piece, it's not going to be as pretty as those lobs to Derek Lively, but it's going to be just as effective because a layup counts the same as a dunk. And if he learns how to play in the pick and roll with Luka, Luka is going to give him the easiest buckets of his career. And I do think that Koa Pete is smart enough and skilled enough to figure that out, which is why I think he's a great fit for the Lakers.
It would be interesting if it plays out that way. Pete was a former lottery projected talent, so yeah, Lakers would be getting objectively good value here at 25 if he were to end up being their pick here. But let's round out the first round of the 2026 draft, starting with the Denver Nuggets at 26. I have them taking Malik Thomas. See, Denver is weird to me because looking at they obviously got out in the first round of the playoffs. They need to improve, but looking at their roster, I also couldn't point to any like weaknesses that they had. I couldn't point to a clear-cut hole on their roster, which concerns me because of the fact that maybe this Denver core hit their ceiling together. I don't know if they have the capability to run it back and compete for a championship with just the way this roster is constructed around Jokic and Jamal Murray. So I have my concerns with the Denver Nuggets in the future, but my same logic for selecting Isaiah Evans to the Lakers, you could always surround Jokic with more shooters. That never hurts. So Malik Thomas at this point, I feel like is the best shooter of this draft, and because of that, I'm going number 26 to the Nuggets. 27 to the Celtics. Here's where I have Henry Vesar going to. A bit lower than you do. Maybe I'm higher on Quaintance and his overall ceiling, even though he's a riskier pick. But Vesar, or at least the Celtics, traded for Nikola Vucevic mid-season, and then by the playoffs, he became completely unplayable. I feel like Vesar offers a very similar skill set as Vucevic, while just being younger and fresher and able to contribute more on the defensive end than Vucevic was for the Celtics. 28, the Timberwolves. I have taken Alex Caravan out of UConn. The Timberwolves have shown they can compete in the playoffs. They have made runs with Anthony Edwards, two straight Western Conference Finals, beating the Denver Nuggets this year before bowing out to the Spurs. What the Timberwolves need right now is a winner. They need a guy that knows how to win. And Alex Caravan is one of the winningest college basketball players of all time. He was arguably the greatest UConn player of all time, just looking at his resume. And UConn as a blue blood, that's definitely worth something adding to your resume. Yeah, there are guys that are more athletic, more skillful than Caravan down the line, but the mentality and experience Caravan brings as a two-time national champion and as well as a runner-up. He's made the national championship game 3 times. He's played in the biggest games you can possibly play throughout his college career, and I think that's going to be really beneficial for the Minnesota Timberwolves this year, who are trying to break through and make that elusive finals appearance. 29, the Cavaliers. Here is where I have Koa Pete going. The Cavs, they have their backcourt with Donovan Mitchell and James Harden. They have their front court, or at least their 4 and 5 with Allen and Mobley. They need a 3, and I think Koa Pete, even with his shooting struggles, could slide in at the 3. It would offer a lot of defensive versatility at 6'8". It would allow the Cavs to play really tall and would make them really difficult to score against. And I think that is something that they needed to look at, especially with the backcourt of Mitchell and James Harden, who struggled to defend anybody on the New York Knicks. just offering more size and more positional versatility, I think, is important for the Cavs at this stage. And I think Kola Pete would fit well with the Cavs here. And the last pick of the first round, the Dallas Mavericks making their second first round pick. I had another Arizona Wildcat going off the board here in Jaden Bradley. I was looking at a lot of the kind of 4-year seniors throughout college basketball. I looked hard at Jacoby Gillespie. I looked hard at Braylon Smith. I looked hard at Richie Saunders out of BYU. But I settled on Jaden Bradley. I just think he's the most explosive scorer out of these four. I think he could learn a lot from Kyrie Irving. I love that fit as a potential mentor-mentee relationship. And the 30th pick is a crapshoot. You could list 40 different guys here and make an argument for them. But I like the fit of Jalen Bradley with the Dallas Mavericks and Kyrie Irving as a potential mentor.
Remind me who you picked with Dallas's first pick at 9. Who'd you take for that?
I haven't taken Mikal Brown, another scorer. Jaden Bradley is in the very similar mold to that. But Kyrie isn't going to be there forever. He's on the wrong end of 30. He's coming off a torn ACL. I do think Brown and Bradley could form an elite scoring backcourt. I mean, Bradley, I feel like, has a pretty high ceiling for the 30th overall pick. And I think him and Brown could form a pretty decent backcourt alongside Cooper Flagg for the Mavericks' long-term future.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I picked somebody similar at 30. I was just curious on what you thought about that fit. So, rounding out my mock draft, once again, we have 5 different picks. So, good for the content there. Denver, to me, their biggest weakness is still the non-Jokic minutes. Valanciunas, to me, is not the answer long-term at all. And I still think Jokic, we're sitting in the middle of his prime. I still think you have another 4 to 5 years of Jokic being a top 3 player in the league, right? So in my opinion, I think Denver needs to go younger. I think they need to replace the non-Jokic minutes with some energy, with some youth. And that's why I have them taking Terrace Reed Jr. out of UConn. This guy balled out in March Madness. And I think his post game, by the way, he could learn a thing or two from Jokic, but his post game is already really polished. Can finish with either hand, drop step on either way, isn't afraid to dunk on you. Really skilled in transition, which helps a lot with Denver's run and gun pace. Their defense, obviously, this year was terrible. I think Terrace Reed will help them on that end as well in the non-Jokic minutes, be a rim protector and an elite rebounder. And I was just really impressed by what I saw out of Terrace Reed in March Madness. I thought he went toe-to-toe with Cam Boozer in that Elite Eight game. You could arguably say he outplayed Cam Boozer in that game. And I think he's the perfect fit for Denver when Jokic is out and Jamal Murray's in. Look for Terrace Reed in transition. He's going to run the court. He's going to get easy buckets with Jamal Murray helping him out, right? I think he could learn a lot from Aaron Gordon and the way Aaron Gordon plays. So I really liked that fit for Terrace Reed, and I noticed that you did not pick Terrace Reed in your first round at all. So that is, I think, the first player that we've said that I've said, at least, that I haven't heard you call. So at 27, I have similar logic to why you took Vassar with Celtics. I took Quaintance here at 27. I look at a guy like Keita, who developed very quickly with Boston, and I think Quaintance could do the same. I am projecting that Boston trades for Giannis, and I think that a front court of Tatum, Giannis, and Quaintance, athletically, they can do everything on the basketball court. Like everything and anything possible you want, they can do athletically. Shooting-wise, that front court is kind of a nightmare. But I do think with Peyton Pritchard and Derek White and Tatum and Sam Hauser, I think there's enough shooting on that roster to overcome Quaintance and Giannis's shooting discrepancies, and I'll take Quaintance there at 27. 28, this was a difficult one. But I did end up putting Ibuka Okori here to the Timberwolves. His raw scoring ability does concern me. When you have a scorer like Ant, you don't want to take away from Ant. However, with the injury to DiVincenzo and the age of Mike Conley, they really do need another guard to step up. And I just think this was more of a positional fit as more than a play style fit, if that makes sense. I think Okori at this point in my mock draft would be the best guard remaining. Maybe you could argue Bradley over Okori, but I'm pretty sure you had Okori way up the board here. So I think Minnesota would probably throw Okori into that 6-man role and maybe start, Ayo Dosunmu at the point or Terrence Shannon at the point, or maybe you start running Ant at the point, right? Like they did some of this year. Because Mike Conley didn't play a lot. He's not the answer. DiVincenzo's going to be out all year with the Achilles. And to me, they just need a guard. So Okori was the best guard available for me here. I think if you played Okori and Ant together, I don't know how that would work, and I'm not exactly thrilled with that. But this to me is just a positional need, and this was the best guard available. At 29, Cleveland, I have very similar logic to you. However, I already used Koa Pete, so we can't pick him. So instead, I plugged in Joshua Jefferson from Iowa State to play that 3.
I like that.
I think he's very skilled for a man of his size. He can do it all on the offensive end, is capable defensively. You can plug him in at the 3 right in that Cleveland lineup, or he can provide great depth at the 4 behind Mobley. So to me, this was a no-brainer. I think this is one of my favorite team fits of any pick I've made so far. And I completely hear you out on Koa Pete. And it's the same logic I have, except I already used Koa Pete. So plug in Joshua Jefferson here. And then at 30, I have Malik Thomas going to the Mavs for very similar reasons that you had Jaden Bradley going. And that's just Kyrie is not going to be there forever. And I originally took Braden Burries. So I think if you run Malik Thomas and Braden Burries as your backcourt of the future, I think that's very exciting to go along Cooper Flagg. Which one of Burries and Thomas would play off the bench when Kyrie's healthy? I don't know. But I just think the athleticism of Thomas and Burries is a good backcourt. And they can play make, get to the rim, shoot threes. Either one of them can play off the ball because they both played with Acuff and Bradley respectively. So they can play on the ball, they can play off the ball, and I think they're a good tandem to work together. So that is my mock draft for the NBA draft.
Yeah, your Terrace Reed point on the Nuggets, you made some great points. I actually think if I were to redo my mock draft, I would mock that pick. I do think that's a much better fit than Malik Thomas, Terrace Reed, and you're right. Terrace Reed went toe-to-toe with Cam Boozer, who we're calling a generational talent. So, Reed's got some scoring ability offensively as well. He's not just a defending, rebounding big man, right? He's got some offensive ability. Ibuka Okori going down to 28 on your board surprised me a little bit. I think Okori is very similar in the mold of Rob Dillingham, who the T-Wolves just traded because he couldn't play alongside Anthony Edwards. But I also think Okori is more on the prospect level of Cam Carr, Christian Anderson, Bennett Sturts than he is going down in this late first round. So what was your reasoning for having Okori down in the late 20s rather than in the late teens?
Honestly, it was just the amount of basketball I watched him play. I didn't watch a lot of Stanford basketball, and I know they weren't good. And so comparing him to like Cameron Carr, I also didn't watch a lot of Baylor. But like Bennett Sturts, I watched throughout all of March Madness. And so to me, I know more about Sturts and I can trust him more. Same thing with Christian Anderson. I watched him absolutely ball out in the Big 12 tournament without JT Toppin, right? So I know more about Christian Anderson. LeBaron Philon, same thing, absolutely balled out in his 2-3 years at Alabama, however long he was there. Like I watched a lot of Philon. He was amazing. And so for me, it was just a confidence thing about Okori.
That's fair.
I don't know much about him. And like I said, I am skeptical of the fit with him and Ant. But they need guards for this season upcoming. And to me, he was just the best guard available that I hadn't picked. If I were to put someone else there, it would probably be Jaden Bradley. But then Okori would fall out of the first round. And I think he's too good of a scorer to keep him out of the first round.
Yeah, that makes sense. Confidence level is definitely a valid reason. I do like the Okori Dillingham comparison as a scoring guard, but one that's undersized, and that's about all that he can offer. So because of that, yeah, it's tough to plan around and fit with alongside Anthony Edwards. I do think you need somebody who can operate more off ball or offer more on the defensive side. Yeah, that's neither of those are necessarily Okori's calling card. So interesting mock there. I think that was the pick that intrigued me the most. I think that one individual prospect that we differed on the most in terms of where we had them selected.
Yeah, I think it was between him, Vasar. We had a good gap. Um, Joshua Jefferson was not in your first round, and neither was Terrace Reed. I didn't have Jaden
Hmm.
Bradley, and I also did not
Or
have
Caravan.
or Caravan. Yeah. Oh, I did want to mention that about the Caravan fit with the Timberwolves. I agree with the experience, but is he really going to play over the wings they have in Ant, McDaniels, Desumu, Shannon? Like, would he really see
Yeah,
the court?
probably not. Probably not. But also at the 28th pick, it's kind of hard to predict a guy that is going to see the court. And also, Minnesota does not have a ton of holes on their roster. I was looking at a player who offered more intangibles than necessarily basketball skill per se. And I think Alex Caravan, you could put all these players in the draft together. I think Alex Caravan might have the best intangibles just based off what he accomplished as a UConn
Absolutely.
Husky. Um,
Yeah, I was
yeah, I
just
just think the experience of winning at
yeah.
college will benefit to the Timberwolves
Yeah.
who are trying to win a championship.
Thinking about your mock now, if I were you, I would have switched Jaden Bradley and Caravan, I think. With team, at least for team fit, because Bradley has all the experience, he has all the intangibles, right? Other than the national championships. But Bradley's played 4 years. He's done it all. He won Big 12 Player of the Year this year. And they need a guard to handle some of the ball handling responsibilities. And then, like you said, the experience of Caravan to go along with Flag, and you had Michael Brown and Kyrie, and obviously the shooting ability. To me, that would make a lot more sense if you had just flip flopped them. I think.
Yeah, that's fair. But again, we're in the late first round. We're nitpicking at this point.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we had 10 different picks to close out the draft. So,
Yeah. Absolutely.
but that'll wrap up this NBA mock draft episode. The NBA draft takes place tomorrow and Wednesday nights. The first time that the NBA draft will be taking over the place of 2 days rather than just one. So we've been talking about how good this draft class is going to be all year. So because of that, I know I will be tuned in. I'm excited to see where these elite prospects will go. Um, Stay tuned for our reaction to the draft. So I'm sure we'll be talking about the winners and the losers, picks we like, picks we dislike, any crazy trades that are made. We'll be sure to talk about. And until then, we'll see y'all next time.
Peace out, guys.
Peace.